Days. Next Monday, in case you're interested, they will host a discussion on competition policy and online platforms, asking the question, are our current rules fit for purpose in the digital age? And then next Wednesday, there is another stellar panel where they will look at regulating political content online and all the discussions around disinformation. So you can register with those, you can follow online on the Twitter feed or at the website of the Permanent Representation. Today, as I say, we're going to talk about AI. It's hugely timely. You may have seen just in the Parliament this morning, the IMCO committee voted on its ideas for the future. So we'll be looking forward to hearing what the Dutch perspective is. A couple of bits of housekeeping. I presume you all have one of these. If you could switch it to silent, that would be great, but don't switch it off because we do want you to follow along online, ask questions, share photographs, tell people who may be watching online because we are being live streamed. So just a note that the video and the audio from today will be captured, and we want everyone to join in using the hashtag Digital Days or AI or artificial intelligence. We can all find each other then and continue the conversation after today's event. With that, I think I will invite our opening speaker, that is Foko Weisler, who will tell us a brief bit about the background to today's event, Director General of Business and Innovation of the Ministry of Economic Affairs.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues from the European Commission, the Council and the European Parliament, welcome. On behalf of the Netherlands, I would welcome you here at the Perm Rep of the Netherlands at the EU. My name is Foko Weisler. I'm a Director General at the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. And I'm happy to be here today. And I'm joined by Michel van Leeuwen and Hanneke Visser of the Ministry of Interior and Kingdom Relations. Michel is from the Ministry of Justice and Kees van der Klauwen of the Dutch AI Coalition. They will also speak in a minute on what we actually do in the Netherlands, and will sit also in the panel discussion. Well, artificial intelligence obviously is one of the mega trends we have in the economy. One of the mega trends we have to face as a government when we look at societal challenges. One of the mega trends where we also have to look into when we want to preserve our system of values, but also our system of economic welfare. So it's only logical that we work and develop policies on AI. We think it might be of tremendous help when we think on issues as aging, when we think of issues as energy transition, the mobility of autonomous vehicles, the food safety and production, like in precision agriculture. Healthcare and AI could help, and it could also help the police force to solve cold cases. There are tremendous contributions to be expected. We therefore also fully support the new Commission's sense of urgency on European cooperation, because we also have a feeling that AI is something which requires a ambition that goes beyond our borders. That's because the challenges we face are not typically Dutch, but they are, in a sense, human, but at least European. And it's also because many of the solutions we seek for require cross-border cooperation or cross-border data sets. So it's in the Commission's ambition to have an AI white paper, which I hope, and in due time, he will be here from DG Connect, Khalil Rouhana, will say something on later in this panel today. For the Netherlands, the European Commission is the European cooperation is just a starting point and is the logical point to connect. From our point of view, AI should be human-centric, and I think this is fully in line with European fundamental rights. It's the logical thing to do. This afternoon, Hanneke, Michiel and myself represent the National AI Strategic Action Plan, the Dutch AI strategy, in line, I would say, with the EU Coordinated Action Plan. We would like to further discuss and share insights with you this afternoon, how to use AI ethically and how innovation is being done in practice. From our point of view, this has various aspects. For instance, how can AI be used to enhance the safety and security of citizens? How can the EU attract AI investments? And what measures can we take to ensure that AI is being developed and used in a lawful manner, in which public values and fundamental rights are safeguarded? And this is also what we call the European approach. And in this European approach, the upcoming white paper on AI will hopefully flesh out how the European Commission is going to do that. We from the Netherlands have circulated a non-paper to the Commission and to all of you today. And in short, it comes down to the following principles. The Netherlands is in favor of a learning approach. And this is and learn and adjust. That's not to say that we should have a Wild West or no regulatory environment at all. No, but we should be willing and able to adopt and learn during the process. So we can understand how to tackle the different aspects and also how we can use the framework and regulations we already have. Because in our experience, it's true that in many cases we already had similar problems in the analog world, where we also have already regulations and laws for, on which we only have to interpret new in an AI or in a digital environment, and then learn how to apply it in that environment. So it's not that we don't want additional legislation, but it's not necessary in many cases if we interpret it anew. And sometimes we do need new regulation to be sure, and we can find this out in a learning approach. It's also of utmost importance that we have a learning approach because AI is about trustworthiness and trusting each other, and so we have to speak to each other, learn from each other, and work in what we dub nowadays as quadruple helixes, where we bring together the government, the knowledge institutions, businesses, but also the citizens, be it in form of patients or consumers, in whatever form, but they have to also be present because it's their data in many cases. In some cases it's just the company's data that has to be shared, and people should be willing to share those data in order for others to exploit them. So we have to create an environment of trust so that we have a trustworthy AI. And also there we need a learning environment so that we can build this trust. This trust doesn't come with regulation. This trust comes with application and experience that it can be exploited safely. And the last reason why we want to have this learning approach is actually that there is no time to waste. If we first discuss and have regulation and frameworks fully thought through, then actually we are missing out on a lot of opportunities, and other economic blocks will be light years in front of us. And I think we cannot afford. We cannot afford because we want to have our own European approach, our EU human-centric position, and then we should also be a true competitor in the global AI race, especially with compared to other economic blocks. Having said that, I look forward to a fruitful discussion this afternoon, and I'm happy to hear in the course of this afternoon your thoughts and views, and I would wish us all a very pleasant and learning approach exercise this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Volker. And as you said, this is a mega trend, so it is no surprise really.
So thanks again, and thanks for. I should do this? Okay. I will be the first to say something, and then Hanneke and Michel will follow up. As said, I'm from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. But we actually built the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Justice. And obviously, there is also a role for government itself. So that's also a reason the Ministry of Interior Affairs is heavily involved. This has evolved in a Dutch strategic action plan, which is going to be presented by the three of us. Let me go to the first slide where we present the three tracks we have. Track 1 is on capitalizing on societal and economic fundamental rights and the position of the citizens. Track 1 I will present, and track 2, and my colleagues Hanneke and Michel will present track 3. Track 1 focuses on capitalizing on economic and societal opportunities, and in the typical Dutch way we do this by making intensive public-private partnerships, because we feel that in that way we can actually create a set of conditions, but also create a market and create a demand and create also a supply which brings from startups to scale-ups to small and medium-sized enterprises, which drives innovation. That's a fundamental insight, and the only way to come to these new combinations is actually to talk to each other, to learn from each other, and to the benefit of the European economy, not only the Dutch economy, but the European economy, and obviously also the Dutch economy and society. So we are developing these tracks together with our partners in the Dutch AI Coalition, and this AI Coalition will be later on, Kees van der Klauw will tell more about that, but we have over 200 institutions, companies, government agencies present now already in this coalition to work together on some sectoral issues and on some horizontal issues, as we feel that that's the way to go forward and create these new opportunities in the sectors and lay the foundations in a common way, so that we also can exploit across sectors. And from the government side, we also have some initiatives which go into the public domain and applying AI in the public domain. And there are examples like how we use it in the tax office. There is a lot of discussion in the Netherlands on the tax office, and in some cases, but in some cases they are really top-notch, and applying AI and other things that can really help also to the benefit of citizens. And I know one of the things we do in the Netherlands is that if you have your personal link, at all the information acquired, and this is done as an excellent example of how the government can improve on their service provision towards citizens. But we also use it in the case of the Ministry of Interior, for example, on the prevention of poverty, because we do and can combine much more information than we had in the past to see how individuals are being affected by different regulations and by different relations they have in the economy and with the government, and we can much more easily see what is at stake and how we can help the citizen. So it also is of benefit in the social domain. And I think these are activities we do in the and all on the track 1, also in the government side. Then we go to track 2, and that's creating the right conditions. As we feel that track 2 is to arrange the required prerequisites for a favorable AI climate in the economy and society at large. And this obviously goes into issues like, do we have the skills? Do we have the knowledge? Do we have the training? Everybody who is over 35 years of age is not educated in the digital age anyway. They had to learn it anew. That's on the basis, but we also obviously have top quality scientific AI research, which is very important just to have this this whole AI approach being working. And we have research institutes like the ICAI Lab in Amsterdam, the Claire Network. We have here one of the leading examples, Professor Hocker, was from the Claire Network, and the Claire Network, by the way, is also a European initiative which has its headquarters in The Hague. We have the Technical University of Delft, focusing on ethical AI. We have Brainport Eindhoven, which is much more on applied research of businesses and professionals. And we have also examples of smart industry with the University of Groningen. So we have top-notch institutions, top-notch universities working on research programs and actually increasing the access to innovation and letting these new combinations work and dig into the boundaries of our knowledge of today. But a set of fundamentals also include, obviously, sprakenstelsels. There's not a good English translation to that, but it's something like trust arrangements between all partners in an AI or data coalition, working together and having regulations, frameworks fleshed out on a voluntary basis, and where they can in a trustworthy manner exchange data. We also work in the Netherlands, obviously, on high quality and intelligent connectivity. Everybody is thinking, obviously, on 5G, and that is also what we do in the Netherlands. We auction the 5G spectrum this year, and the important infrastructure for 5G sensor applications in sectors like mobility are already beginning to be rolled out nowadays in terms of the hardware to actually exploit AI. And so we have the fundamentals right to go ahead. That is what we do under track 2, and now I will hand over to Hanneke to introduce track 3.
Thank you, Focko. As already mentioned by Focko, my contribution focuses on the fundamental rights approach. I'm from the Ministry of the Interior, from the Department of Constitutional Affairs, so that's rather logical. And I'll show you some. This is not the thing I was looking for. It's over here. Every week we see new examples I already mentioned. Skin Vision, for example, is a new AI-based app that promises users it can detect skin cancer with their mobile phone. If true and functional, and someone told me this morning it is functional indeed, because a friend of hers detected skin cancer with this app, this can offer massive benefits to society and to citizens in the EU. But there are also other applications that pose more serious questions to ethics and to our constitutional rights. For instance, this week, the New York Times reported on Clearview. It's a US company that offers very accurate facial recognition tools. The company has 3 billion photos of citizens and allows law enforcement to upload photos to identify people. Collecting and using photos would not as easily be allowed in the EU, and rightly so, as it poses very serious privacy risks. The technological potential is clear, but it requires of the Fundamental Rights chapter of the Strategic Action Plan Artificial Intelligence, already mentioned by Focko. AI offers new opportunities and benefits. We already stated that, but new risks also arise for privacy, non-discrimination, but also due process, autonomy, and human dignity. 3 examples. Potential for bias. These risks are, for example, the potential for bias in AI decisions. We know that the way these applications are built reflects the biases of their creators and can lead to discrimination. For instance, Amazon built a recruiting tool that would help to select job applicants for interviews. As most of the current employees were men, the tool thought that the men would be more successful candidates for employment. That's not what we want to aim at. Another risk is the lack of transparency, spread adoption, and data-intensive nature of these technologies. AI applications require data to work, and these may involve personal data as well, and that poses serious privacy risks. The Minister of the Interior emphasizes in his letter to Parliament that already our current legal frameworks, as Focko stated already, they are enshrined in the human rights treaties, in the Dutch constitution, and also in legislation like the GDPR and equal treatment law. All these laws are applicable to AI applications. Therefore, they form the foundation on which new legislative proposals in the AI field, the new technological developments. In that regard, the Ministry looks at guidelines for legislative officers, completely in line with the approach Focko already stated, the learning approach. But the Ministry will also critically evaluate new proposals in the field, feeling that we should pose these tasks with the existing supervision bodies. There's something not completely as I expected with the slides, but that's no problem, I'll talk on. Clarifying human-centered AI concepts on 4 points. The first is design principles for AI developers that prevent AI systems from having discriminatory human rights impact assessment that helps AI developers to identify and mitigate potential human rights risks of an AI system in an early development stage. We expect to finish this tool in September of this year. In the third place, the Ministry has set up a cooperation platform in which all the ministries in the Netherlands participate and which aims to create more coherence in government policy and government research with regard to public values and human rights. To stimulate dialogue and media literacy, finally, the Ministry of Interior is conducting an awareness campaign whereby citizens are alerted to online disinformation generated by AI, especially relevant in years where we have upcoming elections, like next year. Interactive dialogues with citizens are organized. And with these policy measures, the Dutch government is setting the first steps towards a human-centered, human rights-based AI practice. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this contribution of mine, and thank you for your attention. And I will handle the microphone, not exactly, but I have some confusion with the slides because they're not exactly. Yeah. Maybe you can take over.
Or we'll try without sheets, that will be possible as well. Ladies and gentlemen, as you probably know, the Netherlands was the second country on the internet. In November 1988, a first email was sent from Amsterdam to the US. And last week I spoke to someone who was one of the first people in the Netherlands who had email in the 90s. And he told me something interesting on AI, and I will tell you that later. The Netherlands is a highly digitalized country with a long tradition in rule of law. And we believe that this makes us uniquely positioned to be the nursery of building a human-centered AI society done right. The role of the Ministry of Security and Justice on artificial intelligence is part of the whole of government approach on AI together with the Ministry of Economic Affairs and the Ministry of the Interior, as you've heard. And our approach is threefold. With the rights, of where the rights of individuals are safeguarded. The first pillar of our approach is the application of AI in the security domain. An example of developing AI in a diligent manner is the Dutch National Police Lab on AI. This police lab is a cooperation between the Dutch police and several universities in which AI is developed and research is done on subjects such as transparency, ethical norms, and the impact of AI on the police organization. This is especially useful because the law enforcement sector needs extra safeguards, but sometimes needs exceptions as well. And unique in the lab is the fact that the people working there are part PhD and part policewoman or man. One of the AI tools that have been developed in the lab is an AI that helps citizens reporting online fraud and scams to the police. And the AI helps by giving advice on which legal action is most effective based on the circumstances of the case. Another example on AI innovation in the law enforcement domain is the project FIRE of the National Forensic Institute. In the FIRE project, software is developed that can recognize objects and texts in images. This software is specifically trained with forensic images, which makes it better than generic object recognition, minimize the dependency on AI applications from countries that are proven to have an offensive cyber program against the Dutch national interest. The third pillar is about safeguards. The central question there is, are legal norms sufficient in the AI context? And as stated, in the current legal framework, a lot is already governed. Think GDPR, Article 5, Principles of Fairness, Article 22 on automated decision making, but also in private law, administrative law, and fundamental rights. But we probably need some specific additions when necessary. We think, for instance, on profiling. One thing we developed and are currently testing with the colleagues of the Ministry of the Interior are guidelines against the risks of data analysis by government agencies. These guidelines contain provisions on transparency, quality, and control and correction mechanisms. These guidelines are part of the learning approach, which Focko mentioned. After the testing period is complete, we will examine if the guidelines need partially be codified. And lastly, norms are not particularly useful if citizens can't rely on them or effectuate their rights when necessary. This is currently about two questions. The first one being, real concretely, do we need a separate algorithm watchdog? The same question can be asked on a European level. And the second, dark place. So how can we prevent that from happening in our AI society? And one we are ready to embark on, and one in which we would like to learn from our partners, like you in the audience. So let's continue the discussion on AI done right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that's given us quite an overview without necessarily going to show us the huge amount of work that obviously went into the background in putting this pretty concise...
Short history. The background, I think, has been stated many times, but I still want to start with it because it's something that we express also to our members, our participants of the AI coalition. And I can assure you, and I'm sure you recognize it also for your organizations, it is not yet fully understood what the impact of AI will be. So you cannot sufficiently repeat the message that it's going to impact our welfare and well-being. It's going to attack or influence all economic sectors. So you could say, well, I'm in mechanics or I'm in mining and it will not affect me. It will. Every sector will be affected, and if you manage it right, positively influenced by AI. Yeah? And everyone's daily life. So already Focko mentioned that we are looking at the quadruple helix. So not only government, business, and education and research, but we have to involve end users, citizens, because they will experience the influence of AI. It's pretty new, but still, let's say, 50 years old. Already 25 years ago, when I was still a bit younger, there were pretty good research programs going on in AI. Yeah? But it has now grown exponentially. Yeah? The infrastructure, the computing power, the availability of data has brought us in a good enough position where AI is good enough for many, many applications, while still a lot of research work has to be done. So you have to follow almost a parallel track and say, well, if it's good enough, then a new breed of engineers, application people, legal people, ethical people have to start working on what does it mean in practice. Yeah? It's about platform economics, and I suppose you heard about the winner-takes-it-all approach. In digital economy, the one that has a head start, influence. Yeah? There are large investments in big blocks around us, US, China, and I think Europe and the Netherlands are now on their way. And to be honest, I think we have a second chance. Some people say, well, we are too late. Yeah? We have already these powers in other economic areas in the world, and we cannot match them. Yes, we can, because there is now much more awareness of ethical, human-centric approaches, and that's a chance to come back. It's not a linear catch-up. We have to do things differently, and if we do it in the right way in Europe, I think we can really exploit it and also become an economical power in itself by having the right type of AI, yeah? Human-centric AI. 1.5 years ago, about the sense of urgency, how to do things, already with good recommendations. That resulted in a task force AI, which was a public-private partnership already. People from government, people from education and science, and people from industry were working together and say, how can we put this in practice? How can we form a team? And that led to the government coming with the Strategic Action Plan AI, SAPAI, and the Netherlands AI Coalition, the NLAEU. Yeah? And we are strongly connected. We work together. You will see some examples which were already mentioned by Focko, and Focko mentioned examples that are taken up by us. But we do have distinct responsibilities. Yeah? We are not the government. We are a quadruple helix public-private partnership. And we have a strong history in public-private partnerships. But I'm a bit paranoia. I've been working all my life in digital transformations in industry. And you should never look back and say, well, we've seen this before, so we know how to do it. No. This is about exponential development, so you cannot extrapolate linearly what you've done in the past and then claim that it will be successful for the future. So we are talking about a digital economy requiring a much stronger collaboration than before. Yeah? You could say if you had a good supplier and consumer network, that was good enough for the past. It's not good enough for the future. Some call it Open Innovation 2.0. I call it undress at the doorstep, no hidden agendas. Let's say have a real good engagement in working together. So no lip service, no tourism. Everyone is having issues with human capital. How do we find the right people? And not only, but also how do we make the knowledge that we have in the Netherlands, because we do have very good research infrastructure. How do we make sure that that knowledge is disseminated to end users? Yeah? Many small and medium enterprises don't know how to get access to innovation, yeah, and to knowledge. Yeah? Big companies do know. Data sharing, of course, very obvious. Without data sharing, there's not much as creating AI, but we can provide frameworks in how to do that efficiently. Yeah? Not everyone should try to invent, okay, what are the constraints? What is my liability? How should I interpret GDPR? So we provide a horizontal working group for application groups, helping them to share data in a safe and well-orchestrated way. Yeah? This is an interesting one. Social is to data use for common good, for healthcare, for instance. We are sometimes paranoia. And this working group is to work on those subjects, have the discussion, include people, and improve that aspect. Yeah. And last but not least, startups and scale-ups. How do I get access to data? And how do I find partners in application areas? And that's what this working group is doing, helping them in, or what's your experience with getting farmers involved? Can we do the same in the logistics area? That's coming together in the program team. Yeah? And then, of course, you need some supervision. Yeah? We have to act responsible, so people have to look at how we do it. That's the strategy team. And there's a support team which is organizing, communicating, IT infrastructure, etc. That's how we run Coalition. Emotion. Yeah? Launched October 8th with 60 first movers. And today, more than 250 participants. Yeah? And this is the distribution, which is very interesting. So, government, yeah, this pie will not grow. Actually, it will relatively become smaller because we don't intend to have more government departments in the Netherlands. But we do have a lot of companies that are joining. And you see them from all sectors. You see large companies, to date 43. Those are the typically international companies. Many small and medium enterprises. Startups, interesting. And then we see some branch representatives, research and education, all institutions, so universities, but also high schools, colleges, etc. Healthcare, that's a small one. But since we are now starting up also the healthcare working group, I expect a lot of hospitals to join in the coming months. Yeah? So quite a nice distribution. Yeah? So these are some of the working groups. So we have the technical industry, energy and sustainability. Yeah? Energy and sustainability, also the provinces and even local government cities. Yeah? Healthcare, health and care, mobility, fintech, and probably some new things coming up. Yeah? Very important, we have not assumed that the sector will bootstrap itself. Of course, if you put a lot of money on the table, you will have a lot of supporters, but we want people that actually want to act, yeah? Put a stake in the whole machine and also invest in kind in those projects. For the future, or the near future, we really want to move to what we call hubs and spokes model. There can be an endless discussion in the Netherlands, but also in Europe, about what's the center of the world, who's the most important, yeah? Who pulls all the strings, yeah? Forget it, yeah? There will be multiple centers, and they have to be really good in their field of expertise. And they have to be connected. So in the Netherlands, there are a few places which are very, very good, for instance, in agri and food, yeah? Let them run the show, but also be the center for the rest of the Netherlands and probably in Europe, that people can connect. And those should not only be knowledge centers, but also very much experimentation centers. Yeah? Field labs are extremely important. Yeah? Bring your stuff. There's already a strong network of 10 plus and moving to 20 public-private labs in the Netherlands, the Ai labs, building on strong research networks. And Holger is here, but we also have from Claire, and we have also some projects. So it will be very much a living project, and not just for 7 years, but we also want to make sure that after that period, it's fully adopted in society so that it can continue. Those labs should become normal practice. Yeah. That's very much my presentation about the coalition. Very young, but many initiatives already running in various...
The Leiden University, Holger Hoss, please join me. And also from the European...
I'm intersecting actually wearing two different hats. One has already been mentioned, and this is as one of the initiators of CLAIR, the Confederation of AI, of Laboratories for AI Research in Europe, which is, as of now, a fair number of international collaborations and connections beyond Europe, which we think is very important because AI, of course, has many players outside of Europe. And to look at them just as competition is a little too simplistic and maybe also not helpful. What are we trying to do with CLAIR? Well, we're trying not just for excellence here in Europe in AI, but we're aiming for excellence in all of AI. Many of you have heard of machine learning, and in fact, this is what I do in most of my research. But there are other parts of AI that are of supporting excellence in AI and AI activities across all of Europe. Now that seems like an odd thing to say, right? But it is indeed the case that some thinking is very much focused on the players that are already strong in AI. That's good for the Netherlands because we are strong in AI. But what that perspective is missing, you know, the perspective that says maybe we should look at the Benelux and, you know, Germany and France and maybe the UK and build everything focused on that. What that's missing is the city of peace and justice in The Hague. So that's what CLAIR is about. I think it's wonderful to be here and to be talking about, you know, some of the issues connected to AI. Very much look forward to making a few more contributions there with my colleagues here.
Okay, well, as I mentioned at the very beginning, the IMCO committee voted this morning, so it's very much on the minds of MEPs in the European Parliament. But let me hand over to you, Dragos, just to get your personal perspective.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Congratulations for picking up this topic and for being, I would dare say, as always, very timely with your debates. So I will start a bit with the atmospherics. We are 4 weeks away, plus minus, from the moment where the Commission is going to announce artificial intelligence, ideally before the Commission's paper. And I can say that we are about 2 weeks away from that. And as part of doing that, the one thing that we managed to do, and which I also think is quite good, which is that we managed to bring together our representatives from all of the committees in Parliament, which are working on different bits and pieces of AI, whether it's the ITRE committee, whether it's the IMCO, whether it's the URI, whether it's the LIBE, and try to come with an integrated approach to what would be our view, our vision on artificial intelligence. I would hope that all of the politics actually bring expertise together, bring the difficult political lines together, and also bring the different perspectives around the common vision. Please.
No, I was just wanted to ask you, because I know there's been some talk in the Parliament about having...
Didn't materialize into anything. I think already the agreement to have this special committee is, I think, quite an important step forward institutionally. And I, for one, am very happy to see that materializing, and I am also happy to say that this is something that Renew will be leading. And our interest in digital in general and AI is also, I think, supported limitations, the risks that artificial intelligence gone a bit haywire, uncontrolled, can actually bring to our values and to the way we understand the world, and we would understand, therefore, AI. So I think all this, I'm saying all this to put a bit what I'm going to say in perspective. And I will start very briefly by saying, based on the work that I've done over the last 6 months in leading, at least for our political group, the work on AI in our societies are going to be organized, how we are going to access services, whether it's medical services, whether it's commercial e-commerce, whether it's the cars we drive, so on and so forth. So the one point which seems to be a common point of understanding is that there is a potential there, an economic potential that we need to tap as a continent, as a union, as individual members, as part of this union. The second element of common understanding seems to be the limitations that come with this technology. So yes, it has a potential. Yes, that potential can be great, and it has to be harnessed with the decisions to regulate. And again, there seems to be an understanding that we as Europeans, taking this approach that is human-centric, that is value-based, we need to put this at the heart of anything else that we would do. Now, few considerations on what I believe are the key elements in this debate. First is on competitiveness and innovation. We all seem to agree that as a continent, as a union, we need to stay in the race with China and the US. Great. We all agree that is the point. But how do we do that? And who is the one towards whom we have to point the fingers? And I would say that we should first look at ourselves. Before we blame others, and before we say, well, we're in a race and we need to beat this or that competitor in the race, we need to see what actually holds us behind right now in that race. And I would dare say that what holds us mostly behind is fragmentation. And I think we need to address that fragmentation at European level so that we can actually approach that we have to foster and we have to promote at European level. We need to find a way to bring industry and the decision makers together in a technology and in the development of this technology, as if we want to really stay a bit of emphasis on that. Yes, artificial intelligence will transform slowly but surely the very fabric of our society and the processes of the economy. And if we're not careful, biases could creep unnoticed into the digital world we are building and lead us to a future where those who are discriminated against now will continue to be discriminated or even more so than the way they are right now. And the other thing we need to understand about biases is that we cannot look only at the problems the way we see now, because there will be new problems that will be coming up as a result of artificial intelligence. And somewhat we need to be able to project ourselves in the future, anticipate the kind of problems that can actually be produced as a result of artificial intelligence and the biases that come from that, and prepare possibly for it. And I think this is why it's very difficult to come right now with blanket one-size-fits-all kind of legislation or standards when it comes to dealing with biases. We need to be able to do something that is future-proof, and that will be, I think, the most complicated part of legislating. On trust, I think that one of the key ingredients that will determine the success of AI in the future is consumer trust in the use of AI and its applications. Certification schemes are one idea, and I've heard it already creeping in many of the conversations. Safeguards in ensuring human control wherever an AI system has an impact on a person are also likely to increase trust. Transparency also. Explainability are measures that can risk-based approach or two-stage or three-stage of a rocket. I heard different metaphors for what I believe needs to be at the center of regulating in the future. What differentiation in my mind means is, again, first of all, understanding the complexities, the different applicability of AI, the different objectives, the different types of data that AI deals with, and apply differentiation when we're going to develop standards or legislation. Otherwise, again, if we try to come, I would dare say, a bit like we've done with GDPR, with a one-size-fits-all type of a solution, we risk creating difficulties for that other objective that we seem to all agree upon, which is fostering innovation, allowing good research, and increasing our economic potential. One last point on multilateralism. I worry about the idea of us being arrogant about the way we're going to set standards or legislate. And I would like...
Very much. Now, I spoke a little bit too soon when I said we had no one from the Commission. Unfortunately, Mr. Rouhana can't be here, but he has sent along his colleague, Martin Ulbig, who is a policy officer at DG Connect, also working on the AI paper. So, Martin, please come up and take a seat and tell us how you are getting on. We know time is tight and you're probably writing all the time. Thank you very much for stepping in at the last minute.
Thank you so much, and again, apologies for the absence of Mr. Rouhana, who really wanted to come, but he had the choice of either talking about the AI regulatory framework or actually writing it, so he thought it was more important to actually draft something. Risk which AI could give rise to is regulated, and we're only using AI from other countries because nobody's developing anything in Europe anymore. That is certainly something we want to avoid. On the other hand, we also want to avoid a scenario in which we basically have no regulation and anything goes. You know, you can apply anything you can do in China, you can also do in Europe. That is clearly also something we're trying to avoid. So the objective is to find a balance between, at the same time, on the one hand, promoting the emergence of a European AI ecosystem, and on the other hand, putting in some kind of rules which prevent at least some abuses. Obviously, on the 19th of February, we're not actually proposing any legal text. It's going to be a consultative document. It's going to be open for consultation probably 3 months. The fact that the scale effect, the fact that you need large numbers.
We've heard from Kees already. You missed it, but it was. I'm sure we can find the slides for you. But let me start by coming back to what seems to be the easy bit, which is everyone wants a human-centric AI. Now, as a journalist, and when I want to get a sense of whether a statement is meaningful, I often flip it on its head and ask, would anyone legitimately argue the opposite? And I can't imagine anyone saying, we don't want...
Started using the word, we gave a very clear definition. It's actually a simple one. It is AI that augments human capabilities rather than trying to simply replace them. And yes, there are people, plenty of people, companies, that are very focused on replacing human capabilities. I wouldn't say this is fundamentally wrong, but of course it carries risk with it, right? It carries the risk that many of us are afraid of, that, you know, we basically wholesale replace entire professions. I think there is AI that's worth doing, actually AI that's easier to do given where we currently are, that simply doesn't pursue that goal, but instead focuses on allowing people to do better the things they need to do. AI that compensates for human weakness and biases. You know, people talk a lot about bias in AI, we did too, and I think it's important that we do. But let's be very clear, there's lots of bias in people. And actually, AI used right can help us detect and overcome those biases. We should talk more about that, and we should actually aim for AI that allows us to do that, because as humans, we have many weaknesses. These very weaknesses get us into some of the messes we see around us, around the globe. That's what we mean when we say human-centered AI.
Okay, Kees?
Yeah, I think it's important to mention this explicitly, because when it's implicit, it's often forgotten. And we have seen some applications of AI where, in hindsight, they were not so human-centric. So you could say all well-thinking people say, yeah, it's obvious, but it requires attention to avoid that we have to repair afterwards. And in some cases, this repair will be very costly and could even totally screw the trust that we need in order to have the right applications.
Inside the group from that, what is human-centric? What does it mean? And how do we actually understand it ourselves so that we know the kind of work that we need to do? And what seems to be emerging as the common view amongst ourselves, at least, is that human-centric means a bit that. We start from the benefits and the possible risks that it can bring to humans, and that is the starting point for developing legislation, developing a regulatory framework for that, and that remains at the core of the whole policy approach that we're going to have from now on. And very much complementing what was just said, that you have to think of what actually augments what people can do in their daily lives, from accessing services to doing their work, and AI should be primarily built towards those goals.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't want to go into semantic details, but I mean, the high-level group, not of the discrimination aspect, although that's a real problem, but because of the human control aspect. You know, people have seen lots of science fiction movies. They're afraid of the machines taking over the world. Now, that's clearly a science fiction, but it's not necessarily machines taking over the world, but and why this has been coming to the forefront of the debate in the first place.
And those are doubtlessly really important point, but just to say something else about risk, right? And I think you made a good opening there in that we've been led to believe by Hollywood and a little bit the mass media that the big risk of AI is strong AI gone wrong, right? AI that takes over things. As an expert in AI, I would say that's not the risk we should be worried about at all at this point. Well, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. I think some people should be worried about that because, maybe some decades out, that becomes something on the horizon. But right now, it's not there. What we should be worried about very much is the risk of weak AI used incompetently. And let me point out that we have weak AI right now, and it is being used increasingly. And we also have a lack of talent. We have a situation where the demand on AI expertise outstrips in Europe and elsewhere by orders of magnitude the supply. I know this as an AI researcher, I also know this as an educator. We cannot produce under any conceivable scenario. If the Dutch government invested all they're going to invest in AI into the higher education system, we could not produce enough graduates with these capabilities. And the reason is because there simply aren't enough people that could complete that training in time. So the consequence of that is that we will have, as quickly as we can, more talent. And here the good news are, as I said before, that the talent pool in Europe is not only diverse, which is great, but also very deep and broad. And then invest in the kind of AI that actually lowers the bar to using it responsibly. And the good news here is that in Europe, we actually have a lead in that kind of AI that we can leverage.
Well, I mean, you mentioned earlier on in your first comments about how AI could be used to sort of mitigate against human bias. But presumably that only happens when you've got the sort of workforce of the people designing it from the bottom up who are themselves diverse and unbiased. And so it is a talent question. I mean, otherwise we run the risk of building artificial stupidity rather than artificial intelligence.
Say, if we want to have the ability to look into the AI algorithms and understand them and certify them, if we're going to get into certification or anything like that, we also have to think that apart from the developers themselves and the fact that we don't have enough developers to develop good, strong, intelligent.
Well, Michel raised this question in his opening comments. Do we need a specific sort of body for oversight at EU level? What do you think?
Very much. I'm an engineer by education from microelectronics, and that started from physics and mathematics and chemistry, etc. But they interact with people. And when I was educated, it was very much about functionalities. Yeah? The more pixels, more bits per second, etc. I believe that in the near future, there will be much more attention for the non-functionalities of systems like privacy, security, interaction with people. And that will create the trust. But that is something that you do not see enough, I think, in education of engineers. Yeah.
I would have to agree, as somebody active in that area, that the semiconductor industry has taken about 15 years ago, which is to use AI in order to fortify the minds and the skills of the human engineers dealing with it. I think that's exactly what we need to do again. Yes, we need to train people to have these oversight functions that you mentioned. I think that's absolutely crucial. But we also need to develop the kind of AI that helps people to do that. Because, you know, maybe you all know exactly what AI is, but I sometimes have to explain it to my beginner student to deal with this responsibly. Not just developing it, but also, as you say correctly, deploying it, using it, monitoring it.
Martin, without giving away what we're going to see in the paper.
Train from here to the United States, to Silicon Valley. Yes, I mean, we definitely will have to invest more into the training. You know, how that actually is going to work. We have made some proposals on European level. As you all know, education and training is mostly national competence. It is a difficult topic. It's a very difficult boat to turn around. I would invite all of you to make the case next time you talk to policymakers in your country, like in this case in the Netherlands. But I'm obviously telling that at the same level to everybody in the other member states. And I think in relative terms, although there's a gap in the Netherlands as well, in relative terms, of course, the Netherlands is still in a much better position than some of the other member states.
And what about a watchdog for some sort of independent oversight? I'm thinking, I don't know, something along the lines of the data protection authorities and the data protection board.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I can give a first reaction. Actually, we've invited those authorities in the coalition. But then you get the discussion, should they be really independent outside and watch and then interfere afterwards? Or do they really engage in the discussion? I'm very much in favor of having them on board in a very independent role. Yeah. Well, I mean, oversight bodies exist already for many AI applications. I mean, that's, to a certain extent, it's the mechanics of this is not obvious. If you have AI in medical, AI in financial, or AI in self-driving cars, obviously there are already oversight bodies. And then the question is, what kind of oversight body would you need in addition to that? Would you need something horizontal which covers all the sectors? Would you need maybe specific oversight bodies in specific other sectors which so far don't have that yet? That's clearly a topic for the
remain in Europe, to thrive here, and to come back to Europe, right? Right now, I think there's many people that are elsewhere in AI hotbeds that could be gotten back, right? If the Commission, for example, said, hey, let's make an ERC advanced program for AI, right? Let's have 50 times as many of these over the next year. The kind of thing that Germany, interestingly enough, did and is doing very successfully in order to concentrate AI talent there. It's good for Germany. The problem is that we don't want to do that on the national level because we don't get critical mass that way. So I think there is a job for the Commission to be done there, and it could and should be done just as swiftly as thinking about regulation.
Yeah, sorry. Let me just very briefly. No, I mean, first of all, of course, you're right. I mean, I do agree that the European Commission should be doing as much as it can, and I wasn't trying to say that we can't do anything. But I was trying to point out the fact that our policy levers in that respect are limited. We are clearly doing a lot in research and have been doing ever since the first esprit, actually the way it should be. But of course, where we can do something, we will do something. And just one last comment. I started at the beginning talking about the balance. I mean, we've been talking about regulation now all the time. Let me underline again that the approach we're going to take on the 19th of February is certainly one of balance. So there will be something on what some kind of discussion on maybe regulation, maybe it's necessary, maybe where, but there will also be the package of what we can do in order to support industry development of an AI ecosystem and skills as well.
Okay, I don't think we want to get too bogged down into the education question today. Dragos, however, you had a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, no, just to say that we have ourselves been talking a new dedicated agency or body of some sort to do that. So we will need to look at the existing ecosystem of agencies and institutions at EU level and see where do we want to add, work, thrive, but actually stay. What do we need to do at European level? What kind of, again, of a construction do we need to put in place to bring faster money to fast ideas? So all of the things, all of the shortcomings that we know we have here, which are pushing our startups at the moment of scale up to go elsewhere, that pushes our young talent to actually go elsewhere. So all of these things need to find some sort of a solution that has to be a European institutionalized solution, if not necessarily meaning that we need to again construct up the ones that we want them to be. So I think that there needs to be a bit further creative thinking there, and we are all very eager to see what the Commission is going to suggest on this aspect. But I can tell you that on our side in the European Parliament, we are
just a moment about European success stories that are known around the world. 3 come to my mind immediately. CERN. There's no physicist in the world that doesn't know who CERN is, and they invented the World Wide Web just on the side. ESA, the world's leader in Earth observation, and therefore the people who hold, to a large degree, the key to tackling climate change, because Earth observation produces the kind of data and models that will be absolutely crucial to deal with that. And Airbus. And I won't say anything about Boeing today, but I will say that, Airbus was something that in the beginning internationally was smiled at, right? Why would the Europeans try to compete with in a market where there's basically such a strong player? And look where we are today, right? What I think we need to do is we need to create something in AI, a brand, a thing, an institution that rivals those 3 examples. And that cannot be just a distributed thing. Symbols are not distributed, right? Communities that support these symbols are distributed, and they should be, because they should leverage the full diversity that we have across this union and its associated countries. But the symbol itself should not be distributed. There should be one place in Europe where the world's best AI people come together, at least for some time, in order to do great things. That's the kind of thing that CERN is, right? We need that kind of a thing for AI. And as pleased as I am to see the Commission thinking about a public-private partnership in AI, which is very reasonable, regulation in AI, which is very reasonable, what I'm missing is the fulfillment of the promise that we see on the Bellemont building today, which is une unie plus ambitieuse. We are not ambitious enough in AI, not nearly. People talk about a lot of money, but there is, I think, a bit too much talking. I really like the approach that we've heard about earlier today, about experimenting a bit.
I very much like the ambition. We have had earlier talks about having one center in the world. I'm not sure CERN is the best example in this context, and I refer.
We don't need the network, right? I mean, as you know, in Claire, we built the network. Mm-hmm. We have that network of 20,000 people, and we need to invest into this network. We also need strong hubs, regional hubs that you mentioned. We need that too. The Claire strategy, the Claire vision has 3 components. It's very clear that we need these, but I do think that we need the one place where things come together. And there's a reason why the last thing that Steve Jobs did was to plan that amazing building. That's a building that's known around the world because of its concentration of great people that work there. We need local critical mass in addition to a strong network and ecosystem.
But if you start late, you need a few billion to get there. Sure. Yeah. So
doesn't it always come down to money?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, I think we have a moment I can take one or two questions from the floor. Brianna, I see you. Anybody else?
Of accountable organizations, how can we stimulate and incentivize organizations for developing, selling, implementing AI to create best practices and share those? I think that's on top of some regulation. Second, can we use innovative regulatory mechanisms like sandboxes? We've got great examples, UK Data Protection Commission are doing one, FCA, financial services, to actually enable this two parties working or multi-party working.
I would like to see that interaction happening, just as you say, in a sandbox, in a partnership where, because it is such a complex technology, which none of us actually understands fully to the very extent, we should actually be trying to do things together. So when I'm developing standards as a regulator, in fact, I should be doing them while talking to the industry, while testing even with the industry, to make sure that the regulating comes a bit with a more natural guidance.
Yep.
And with the development that actually takes place there. So I would very much like to see myself that as part of the thinking that the Commission will be doing when they are going to put forward the ideas in the white paper.
Yeah, that's my plea of get involved. And you have to create a safe environment, because first people have to admit that they don't know either. Many regulators also don't know.
Totally agree. I think especially what you just said about having these kind of sandboxes, that's exactly what we should do. And I would point out that the
Lady down, yeah.
Thank you. I'm Evelyn from Bits of Freedom, a digital rights organization based in Amsterdam. So I was curious, it might be completely clear to you, but do you see a difference between human-centric AI and human rights-centric AI, or are they the same thing? And then my second question, I'm hearing both that we should compete with China, China, I guess, being a stand-in for a controlling, oppressive government, but also that we don't want our existing...
So, we do have legislation, and that should be applied to a machine which uses AI just as much as it should be applied to a machine which does not use AI. I mean, to a certain extent, it's just, technology neutral, it's non-discrimination also between technologies. And that clearly applies to human rights. I think the answer is yes. Human rights is definitely part of the human-centric approach. I think it goes a bit more than just human rights. I think human-centric is more about, not just about respecting human rights, it's a bit more than that.
Okay, well, I think we've come rather full circle, but I will allow a last couple of words from each of you, because I'm conscious that we didn't get to touch on so much.
We are somewhat historically at the dawn of this new technology, even if a lot has been done already, and some have already maybe gone further than others in
AI technology, where really it is there. By many metrics, we're actually still leading, for instance, in terms of academic production. You might think of Silicon Valley, but actually there is more academic insight in AI. You remember the talk about the walled garden? That was the App Store? That walled garden, sure, made the company into $1 trillion company. And that walled garden...
We've been talking a lot about the downsides. There are downsides. They may need to be addressed, but fundamentally AI is an opportunity, and we really should be looking forward to it.
Legal entity, but there is insufficient, let's say, drive to say, well, let's go for it, and let's solve these difficult issues. Let's have a good interpretation of GDPR across multiple organizations. And I think that's what we need in Europe. We have to look for the boundaries and challenge ourselves rather than to be risk averse and say, well, let's wait and see, because then we're dead.
Okay, well, we don't want that.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much to our panel. Please join me in giving them a big round of applause. Thank you. And to wrap up again, I'd like to call back to the stage Hanneke and Michel to give their viewpoints from the points of view of the Ministry.
Well, it's nearly impossible to do a wrap-up from all these approaches we experienced this afternoon, but I'll try to do the regulation part, and Michel will do the rest. The regulation was at the heart of the debate, I think, and I think one of the conclusions is that the learning approach is very, very important also on the regulation. I heard someone say that we need field labs where the regulators would be present so that they could learn in the field lab, review and also correct already existing regulations. And I should say that would be the right approach, because it's impossible to regulate AI from behind your desk. You have to experience it, and well, that's an insight that we take away from this discussion. Then the human-centric AI approach. There was some discussion about the question.
Sense of urgency, and we leave with more sense of urgency, I think. We got a call to ambition. I think that's a call for Europe. I think the Dutch really want to support that. And I think last point I would like to make is the point we have to educate ourselves. So it's not only about keeping the right minds and the best minds in Europe, it's also about educating ourselves. And I think today has been a first step in that. As Jennifer said, the discussion is still not over. It's only just started, and we were really happy to contribute to that, and going to go on to contributing that in the future as well. So I thank you all for coming, and hope to see you.